Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Schabert. I created this podcast to leverage 12 years of osteopathic medical training and over a decade of experience in primary care medicine to help sort through the confusing and sometimes contradictory health information found on the internet. I want to distill all this information down to a form that you can use every day to optimize your health as you move forward through life. So if you are looking to get to life's finish line with the ability to do the things you love intact, then this podcast is for you. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button and throw us a like as well. It really helps us get this information out to more people. With all that said, let's move on with today's episode. Welcome to the latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast channel. Today, I want to delve into a topic that moved into the forefront of my consciousness after watching two separate videos earlier this week on very different and desperate topics. They both had a common thread, though, and it illustrates something that I think is a major problem in the United States right now. And that is our general distrust of expertise and science and institutions. I think this is driving a lot of the major health issues we're seeing in the US right now. And I'd like to get into it a little bit more. With that in mind, what I'm looking to accomplish with this video is to try and initiate a discussion with you, my audience, and get your feelings and feedback on whether or not you think I'm onto something here or if I'm completely off base. I want to know what your experience has been like with regards to healthcare and medical science. Do you have people that you connect with that have real expertise in the field that are giving you feedback that you trust that is helping you make good medical decisions? Or do you feel like you are lost in the medical wilderness, more or less up a creek without a paddle? The first of these videos that I want to talk about is a legal video. And this one discusses the case of the infamous TikTok psychic. Some of you may already be generally aware of this. Some of you may not have heard a darn thing about it. But this was a case where a woman with a rather high visibility psychic TikTok channel, where she did tarot readings and made predictions off of them, made a powerful assertion after the Idaho College murders that they had the wrong person. Brian Kohlberger was not the primary culprit. She asserted that it was actually a professor that had a couple of the victims in her class and the ex-boyfriend of one of the victims that were behind the murders. I'm not going to go too much into the details of her actual accusations, but suffice it to say that the assertion she was making resulted in a lot of misery for the professor and the ex-boyfriend. And that led to a defamation lawsuit. Well, this TikTok psychic, despite having a master's and a bachelor's degree and a history of prior military service, stated that she did not trust attorneys at all. She thought they were all scammers and they were just out to make money. She also felt that her skills as a psychic and with tarot reading gave her a degree of immunity to these defamation claims. As a result, she never consulted an attorney with regards to this lawsuit, and she never hired an Idaho boarded attorney to handle the case for her. The outcome was rather predictable and predictably disastrous. She ended up having a summary judgment for defamation issued against her successfully by the plaintiffs. And the trial that ensued to ascribe damages was badly mishandled by the defendant, who acted as her own attorney. She misplayed the jury selection, and almost every part of the case, the arguments she made were not consistent with legal precedent. As such, she lost again and again and again. The final result was a $10 million judgment, with $7 of the $10 million being punitive damages, meaning that almost certainly this judgment is not dispensable through bankruptcy. She's financially ruined in part because of her distrust in legal expertise. If she had consulted an attorney when she first found out about the possibility of a defamation lawsuit, there was potential to back off of her statements and potentially settle this case without major financial damage. But she went from being a very successful TikToker to now being completely disgraced and financially ruined. Well, the second video I want to talk about gets more into my neck of the woods. This is one talking about the obesity epidemic in the United States and what Chris McCaskill, a Stanford trained geophysicist with a background as an entrepreneur and an environmental epidemiologist, states is the primary cause of the obesity epidemic. Mr. McCaskill has a very successful YouTube channel called Viva Longevity, which I highly recommend, in which he puts his epidemiologic background to good use, analyzing a lot of the massive retrospective cohort studies that are out there analyzing health and wellness. He himself has a number of health issues as he pushes into his 70s that have caused him to develop a keen interest in nutritional and lifestyle science. And his analysis of the available data is spot on, in my opinion, and very much worth consuming. Let's check out this video of what he ascribes as the primary cause of the obesity epidemic in the United States. I think it's fascinating, and we'll talk about it after.
But tragically, while we led the world in science in the 60s, we now lead the world in science denial. Scientists are no longer leading scientific agencies like NASA. They're being fired, and countries around the world are recruiting them. What does this have to do with what happened to America's health since the 60s, you ask? I think trust in science is the second most important indicator of a population's health after poverty. For example, here's what one of the most famous doctors in America, Mark Hyman, who is not a nutrition scientist, had to say about nutrition science. 40 years of lies. That doesn't sound like trust in science.
This is a short segment from a much longer video that I would encourage all of you to check out if you have the kind of interest in nutritional science that I do. It's loaded with great information. I'll include a link in the description of this video. The idea that Chris McCaskill presents in this clip, that the number one reason for the obesity epidemic in the United States and the poor general metabolic health of the American people isn't seed oils or highly processed foods or any of the other myriad of things you'll see vilified in the press and on social media. It's the distrust of science and the lack of nutritional education in this country. He reinforces this point a little later in his video by going over the conditions in Norway, Spain, and Japan with regards to obesity. All three of these countries have obesity rates in the low 10% range, very consistent with where the obesity rate was in the US back in the 1960s. These countries have a lot of the same highly processed foods that we see in the United States. They have ready access to sugared sodas and seed oils. And yet their obesity rates have not risen the way that we've seen them rise in the United States. The factor that Chris McCaskill attributes this to is the fact that all three of those countries have mandatory nutrition education as part of their primary school system for young children. And throughout their development, they are educated on a food pyramid type based nutrition. It's one that is tailor made to the traditional diets in each of these countries that, of course, are very different than the traditional American diet. But it's this nutrition education that he attributes with the lower rate of obesity. This is obviously a controversial idea. And I do want to hear some feedback from all of you on. My feeling is that it's not the food pyramid or government food policy that has been the driver of obesity in the United States anywhere near as much as it's been the lack of knowledge of general nutrition and the inability to adhere to nutrition recommendations by the government that has led to the obesity epidemic. It's been a failing of the medical profession and medical related institutions that we haven't done a better job of building trust with the American people so that they think they can trust our nutrition recommendations to them. We've also created a healthcare system where primary care physicians have very little time to do lifestyle education, and many primary care physicians don't even do that. So I think this failing is one of the prime drivers of the problem. And I think it's important going forward that we find ways for medical professionals and medical communicators like myself to do a better job of building rapport with the American people, listening to their concerns, not dismissing them as conspiracy theories or misinformation, and engaging with them in such a way that we can give good information. We can tell them why they're off base when they're wrong in interpretations of different data. Unfortunately, I see a lot of incorrect information that is not helpful at all when I go through social media. There are a lot of opportunities to engage on these kind of topics, such as vaccines and COVID 19. One of the things I have seen over and over again is inaccurate information on vaccines. One example of this are individuals I've seen, one of whom is now on the vaccine advisory committee for the CDC, who are talking about COVID-19 vaccine data out of the Czech Republic. And one of the things I've seen is a claim that the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is responsible for early death and increased mortality in 1 in 4 individuals who have received it in the Czech Republic data. Well, this is a gross misinterpretation of that data because in it, they are comparing all-cause mortality in the individuals that got the Moderna vaccine to individuals who were not vaccinated in the Czech Republic. Doing that is problematic for one reason. Well, for multiple reasons. But the primary one is that those are not similar populations. The Czech Republic had limited access to the mRNA vaccines early in the pandemic and really only got a very limited number of the Moderna doses. As such, and because the Moderna vaccine was known to generate the most robust immune response, they prioritized giving Moderna to the sickest and oldest individuals in the Czech Republic, those who were most vulnerable to COVID 19. As a result, it makes perfect sense that the youngest, healthiest individuals who didn't have access to vaccines had lower all cause mortality in the years after the vaccine was distributed than the sickest individuals who got prioritized for Moderna. This is just one example of where individuals without scientific training looking at raw data can be dead wrong in their analysis. And I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but one of the things I want to point out when it comes to vaccinations, it's vaccines that have had the most potent positive effect on life expectancy of any intervention devised by mankind. It beats out antibiotics, it beats out sanitation, pretty much everything. And yet, we still have a great deal of distrust of vaccines in the general populace in the United States. There are a number of red states where some ethnicities and some population groups have as low as a 55 to 60% vaccination rate. And this has led to the measles outbreak that I've covered repeatedly on my channel, the problems with whooping cough pertussis that I've also covered on my channel, and the severity of this past flu season. All of these things could be greatly improved with wider vaccination. And yes, there will be some individuals, although a very small number, who are harmed by expanding vaccination rates. But that's rare. And the harm of not being vaccinated is far more common and far more severe. And look, This sort of distrust that we're seeing with vaccines, with COVID-19 policy, it does have some basis in fact. I think the way the medical profession and the public health authority have handled some of these things have left people with an understandable bad taste in their mouth. Mistakes were made in how we handled vaccine mandates and in how we handled lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is something I covered previously. To rebuild trust as health professionals, we have to acknowledge when we've made mistakes. Our public health departments have to acknowledge when they, with the best of intent, instituted policies that ended up doing more harm than good. It's important that this happens if we're going to get better long-term health outcomes in the United States. We have quote unquote experts all over the internet, some of whom are physicians and some of whom are lay people, dispensing health advice that is not based in solid science and solid scientific fact and is in fact harming people. Too often, the individuals doing this are profiting from the effort in one way or another. And that is something that really bothers me as somebody who devoted a big part of his life to trying to do the absolute best in giving health advice to people. All right, that ends my rant on this topic. Please do check out the Viva Longevity channel. There is just a great deal of information there that can be helpful to you in making good, informed, health related decisions for yourself and with having a good, informed discussion with the medical professionals in your life. Let's make this video the start of an ongoing discussion on this topic. I want to have a vibrant, respectful conversation in the comment section of this video. And I hope it's something that we can use to further all of our understandings on this important topic and to try and move things forward so all of us can do a little bit better. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.